The phone rang at 3:12 p.m., right when I was folding the last of the tiny onesies I'd bought for the new baby, the ones with little yellow ducks that made me smile every time I looked at them. The afternoon light was pouring through the kitchen window, soft and golden, the kind of light that makes everything feel possible. I'd waited 4 years for this moment. 4 years since Paul's funeral, 4 years of saving every extra penny, of doctor visits that left me bruised and hopeful, of injections that stung for days and scans that kept me holding my breath, to finally hold my own child. Laura's name flashed on the screen, and before I even said hello, I knew what was coming. "Mom, I need you to take Sophia and Liam tonight. Connor has that work dinner and the sitter just canceled." Her voice had that sharp, take-no-prisoners edge she used whenever she assumed the world would rearrange itself for her, like my life was still an extension of hers. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, feeling the familiar twist in my stomach, the same one I used to get when she was 16 and missed curfew by 3 hours. "Laura, I can't." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "I have my final ultrasound tomorrow morning at 8:30. I've been waiting 6 weeks for this appointment. They're checking the baby's heart again." The words felt heavy leaving my mouth, like I was confessing a crime. Silence. Then a laugh that wasn't really a laugh, sharp enough to cut glass. "Your ultrasound? Mom, come on. It's one night. The kids need their grandmother. What am I supposed to do, leave them home alone?" I could hear the clink of ice in a glass on her end, the faint thump of music in the background. She wasn't even pretending this was about Connor's dinner anymore. I closed my eyes and saw the calendar on my fridge, tomorrow's date circled in purple markers so many times the paper had started to tear. Dr. Reynolds had squeezed me in as a personal favor after the last scan showed that shadow near the baby's heart, the one that made her voice go quiet on the phone. I was 61. This pregnancy had already been labeled high risk a dozen times over. "Laura, this isn't negotiable. I need to be rested. I need to be there." "You need to be there?" Her voice climbed, cracking like a whip. "They're your grandchildren, Mom. What kind of grandmother chooses some routine scan over her own family?" The words landed exactly where she meant them to, right in the soft spot she'd been aiming at since the day I told her I was trying IVF one last time. I felt my throat tighten, the old shame rising like bile. "I'm not asking for a week, Mom. I'm asking for one evening. Don't be selfish." Selfish. That word again. The one she'd weaponized ever since Paul died, and I stopped being the yes grandma who dropped everything the second she snapped her fingers, who canceled plans, who pretended exhaustion was a luxury I couldn't afford. I could feel the baby shift inside me, a gentle reminder of why I'd fought so hard to get here. I took a slow breath that tasted like the lavender candle flickering on the counter. "Laura, I love Sophia and Liam more than anything. But I have to take care of this baby too, and right now that means tomorrow's appointment comes first." "Fine," she snapped, and I heard the slam of a car door on her end. "I hope your precious appointment is worth it when your grandchildren remember you weren't there for them." The line went dead. I stood in my sunny kitchen holding a stack of duck-covered onesies, the soft cotton warm from the dryer, feeling the old guilt try to crawl back in through the cracks she'd opened. My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed the fabric, remembering how Paul used to tease me about my need to fold everything perfectly. But I'd spent 4 years in therapy learning how to close that door on that guilt, how to recognize it wasn't mine to carry, and I wasn't opening it tonight. I finished folding, set the onesies gently in the nursery drawer next to the tiny socks I'd bought on sale, and went to bed early, setting 3 alarms so nothing could go wrong tomorrow. If you've ever felt that sting of being called selfish just for protecting something sacred, stay with me. If my story resonates, subscribe to the channel and keep me company for the next one, because you're not alone, and neither am I. The next morning I woke before the alarms, heart fluttering the way it had been for weeks, part excitement, part terror, the same flutter I used to get when Paul would kiss my forehead and promise everything would be okay. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of the floorboards under my bare feet. I drank decaf tea that tasted faintly of vanilla, ate toast with the strawberry jam I'd made last summer when the grief felt too heavy to carry alone, and drove the 45 minutes to the maternal fetal medicine center in silence, rehearsing the questions I'd written on the back of an envelope. Is the heart defect still there? Is the baby growing? Am I still safe to carry to term? My palms were damp on the steering wheel. Dr. Reynolds greeted me with her usual calm warmth, the kind that made you believe miracles still happened in fluorescent-lit rooms. The ultrasound room smelled like lavender and antiseptic, cool air raising goosebumps on my arms. She moved the wand slowly, and there he was, my son, waving a tiny fist like he already knew I was watching, like he was saying, "I'm still here, Mom." "Everything looks stable, Eleanor," she said, smiling at the screen, her voice softening the way it does when the news is good. "The septal defect is small, likely to close on its own. You're doing beautifully. Keep taking it easy, but we're in the clear for now." I cried right there on the table, relief pouring out of me like water, hot tears sliding into my hair. I pulled into my driveway at 12:43 p.m. and froze. There, on my front porch, sat Sophia and Liam, 8 and 6 years old, backpacks at their feet, Sophia holding her little brother's hand so tightly her knuckles were white, her face pale in the harsh noon light. An Uber idled at the curb for half a second before pulling away. My groceries slipped from my arms and oranges rolled across the driveway, bright against the gray concrete. "Grandma Eleanor!" Liam launched himself at me, sobbing into my shirt, his small body shaking so hard I felt it in my bones. Sophia stood rooted, eyes huge and frightened, the same gray eyes Laura had, only now they were filled with something ancient and terrified. "Mommy put us in a car and said you'd be home. The man got lost for a long time. We waited and waited." The world tilted, the edges going soft and dark. I dropped to my knees on the warm pavement, wrapping them both in my arms, feeling Liam's small body shake against mine, Sophia's stiff with the effort of holding herself together. The smell of her strawberry shampoo mixed with the faint scent of fierce sweat. "You're safe now, loves. You're safe." But inside, something cold and furious was blooming, sharp as broken glass. Laura had put my grandchildren, her children, into a rideshare alone because I dared to say no. I carried their backpacks inside, the straps cutting into my palms, got them juice in the plastic cups with the faded cartoon characters, turned on their favorite movie, the one about the lost fish that always made Liam laugh, and sat them on the couch with the big quilt Paul and I bought on our honeymoon, the one that still smelled faintly of his aftershave when I buried my face in it on the worst nights. Then I stepped into the kitchen, closed the door so they wouldn't hear, and called her. "Mom, thank God," Laura answered on the first ring, voice high with fake panic that didn't quite hide the slur at the edges. "Where are the kids? I sent them to your house hours ago. I've been worried sick." "You sent them in an Uber, Laura, alone, after I told you I couldn't watch them." My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm, the kind of calm that comes right before a storm breaks. "They've been sitting on my porch for over an hour." Silence. Then, "Well, if you just watched them like a normal grandmother, stop." The word cracked like ice breaking, sharp enough that I felt it in my teeth. "Do you have any idea what you've done? They're 6 and 8. Anything could have happened." "Oh, please," she scoffed, and I heard the clink of a glass again. "Nothing happened. They're fine. You're overreacting because you feel guilty." "Guilty?" I laughed, a sound with no humor in it, raw in my throat. "Laura, I'm calling the police, and then I'm calling CPS. You don't get to gamble with their lives because I had a doctor's appointment." "You wouldn't dare," she whispered, and for the first time her voice cracked, not with anger, but with something that might have been fear. "Watch me." I hung up and dialed 911. The dispatcher took the details without emotion. Children, ages 6 and 8, placed in rideshare by mother, dropped at incorrect address initially, waited unsupervised for approximately 90 minutes. Officers were on their way. While we waited, I made macaroni and cheese, the orange kind from the box that Sophia loved, the one that I kept in the pantry for emergencies I never thought would look like this, and let them tell me everything. how the driver had gotten confused between Oak Lane and Oak Avenue, how he drove around for 20 minutes before a neighbor noticed two kids on her porch and called another Uber to bring them the last 3 blocks. How Sophia had promised Liam I would be home any minute, even though she wasn't sure, her voice trembling as she repeated the promise she'd made to keep her little brother from crying. Officer Ramirez arrived first, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, gentle voice that made Sophia relax a fraction. She sat on the floor with the kids, asking questions the way you ask a frightened animal to trust you, while her partner took my statement in the kitchen. When she asked Sophia to tell her what happened, my granddaughter looked at me first, searching my face for permission, then recited it all in a steady voice that broke my heart clean in two, ending with, "I just wanted Grandma Eleanor to come home." By the time Laura showed up, hair perfect, makeup fresh, smelling like the perfume counter at Macy's in something sharper underneath, the police were filling out forms and CPS was already en route. "What is this?" she demanded, storming past the officer at the door, heels clicking on my hardwood like gunshots. "You called the police on me?" "You put your children in danger," I said quietly, my hand resting on Sophia's shoulder, feeling her lean into me like I was the only solid thing left in her world. "This isn't about me anymore." She opened her mouth, then saw the officer's face and thought better of it. Instead, she knelt in front of Sophia and Liam, reaching out with manicured hands that trembled just slightly. "Babies, Mommy's here now. Let's go home." Sophia shrank against me, her fingers digging into my shirt. Liam buried his face in my hip, muffling a small, terrified sound. "No," Sophia whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. "We're staying with Grandma Eleanor." Laura's eyes flashed to me pure venom, the same look she used to give me when I wouldn't buy her the designer jeans in high school. "You turned them against me." "No, Laura," I said, stroking Sophia's hair, feeling the silk of it between my fingers, grounding myself in the small, real things. "You did that yourself." CPS arrived 20 minutes later. Miss Chen took one look at the children clinging to me like I was their life raft, reviewed the police report, listened to Sophia repeat her story one more time in that careful, too-old voice, and made the call on the spot. Emergency temporary custody to the closest relative, me, pending investigation. Laura screamed. She threatened, she cried pretty tears that slid down her cheeks without smudging her mascara, the way she'd learned in pageants when she was 12. The officers escorted her out while she shouted that I would never keep her children, that I was jealous because I was old and pregnant and pathetic, that this wasn't over. The door closed. Silence fell, broken only by Liam's sniffles and the soft tick of the grandfather clock Paul had loved. I looked down at 2 terrified little faces and felt the weight settle on my shoulders. Not heavy, but right, like something I'd been waiting my whole life to carry. "How about we have a sleepover?" I said softly, wiping Liam's tears with the sleeve of my sweater. "Just us. Movies, popcorn, sleeping bags in the living room, and tomorrow we'll figure everything out together." Sophia nodded against my side, her breath hitching. Liam managed a watery smile that looked exactly like Paul's used to when he was trying to be brave. That night, I tucked them into the guest room that still smelled faintly of the lavender sachets I'd sewn while dreaming of my own baby, the ones I'd planned to hang above a single crib. I kissed their foreheads, promised them they were safe, lingered in the doorway watching their chests rise and fall under the quilt, and then I sat on the nursery floor among the stacked diapers and half-assembled crib and cried, not from fear, but from the sudden, fierce knowledge that my family had just grown in a way I never expected, that the tiny onesies with yellow ducks now had 2 more children to share them with someday. 2 days later, the investigator came back with photos from Laura's Instagram, posted while her children sat scared on my porch in the spring heat. Selfies at a rooftop bar downtown, champagne flute raised to the camera, caption glowing, "Finally, some me time, #blessed, #living my best life." The timestamp was 12:17 p.m., 26 minutes before I pulled into my driveway. The judge granted me temporary sole custody within the week. Laura got supervised visits only, 1 hour, twice a week, in a beige room that smelled like old coffee and broken promises.
Connor, my son-in-law, called once, voice shaking, begging me to work something out, saying Laura was spiraling, that he didn't know what to do. I told him the children needed stability more than they needed excuses, and if he wanted to be part of the solution, he could start by showing up sober to the next hearing and maybe, for once, put his kids before his wife's chaos. I was 32 weeks pregnant, suddenly raising an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old who woke from nightmares calling for a mother who wasn't there, and learning that love doesn't ask if you're ready, it just arrives and dares you to rise. The first small victory came 3 weeks in. Laura had demanded an extra visit, claiming she'd turned a corner. I said no. My blood pressure was spiking again, I had a non-stress test scheduled at the same time, and the kids had school projects due that they'd worked so hard on. She showed up anyway, banging on my door at 7 in the morning, screaming through the wood that I was keeping her babies from her, that I was poisoning them against her. Sophia peeked out the window, saw her mother's car idling at the curb, and ran to me white-faced, her cereal bowl forgotten. "Grandma, I don't want to go with her today, please."
I knelt down, feeling the baby shift as if he understood the gravity of the moment. "Then you don't have to," I said, cupping her cold cheeks. "You never have to go anywhere that scares you. Not anymore." I opened the door just enough to speak through the chain, morning light cutting across Laura's furious face. "Laura, you don't have visitation today. Leave or I call the police." "You can't keep them forever," she shrieked, pounding once more for emphasis. "Actually," I said, holding up my phone, already dialing 911, "right now I can." She left, tires squealing, leaving black marks on my quiet street. Sophia hugged me so hard I felt the baby kick in response, a solid thump against my ribs like he was cheering. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just keeping them safe, I was teaching them they had the right to say no to people who hurt them, even if that person was their mother. I turned that small win into evidence for the next hearing, recorded the voicemail Laura left afterward full of threats and tears. The judge extended temporary custody another 90 days and ordered Laura into mandatory inpatient rehab and twice-weekly drug testing. She failed the first test, cocaine, then the second, then stopped showing up altogether. Some truths you never want to learn about your own child. Some truths sit in your chest like stones you carry for the rest of your life. Months blurred after that. I learned how to braid Sophia's hair the French way she liked, my fingers clumsy at first with the thickness of it, until she patiently showed me for the 10th time, and I finally got it right. I sat through Liam's t-ball games, cheering louder than anyone, my hands cupped around my growing belly, shouting myself hoarse when he hit the ball off the tee and ran like the wind to first base. I painted the nursery pale green on a Saturday when the kids were at a supervised visit that Laura never showed up for, hung a mobile of paper cranes above the crib, whispering to my unborn son that he was about to become a little brother twice over, that his siblings already loved him even though they'd never met. My blood pressure stabilized, the baby grew strong, kicking like he was practicing for the Olympics, and every night, 2 children who used to flinch at loud voices now fell asleep knowing exactly where they were loved without conditions, their small hands reaching for mine in the dark when the nightmares came. At 39 weeks, my water broke in the middle of making chocolate chip pancakes on a Saturday morning that smelled like vanilla and hope. Sophia called 911 like we'd practiced a dozen times, calm as anything, reciting my address while Liam held my hand and told me to breathe like the YouTube video we'd watched together, his small voice steady even though his eyes were wide. I laughed through a contraction, actually laughed, and told them they were the best birth coaches a grandma ever had. Paul Michael was born at 2:17 a.m., screaming his lungs out, perfect with Paul's nose and my stubborn chin. Sophia and Liam met him the next morning, eyes huge with wonder in the harsh hospital light. Sophia touched his tiny hand with one careful finger and whispered, "We'll teach you everything, little brother," like it was the most natural promise in the world. Laura's rights were terminated 6 months later.
The judge cited repeated failed drug tests, refusal to complete rehab, abandonment of supervised visitation, and the initial endangerment incident that started it all. Connor didn't fight it. He'd moved out months earlier, started drinking more, sent child support sporadically, and stopped showing up altogether. I adopted all 3 children on a Tuesday in May, the courthouse smelling like lemon polish and fresh beginnings. Sophia wore the yellow dress she'd picked out special at the mall, twirling in the dressing room until I couldn't say no. Liam refused to take off his Spider-Man tie, even though it clashed with everything. Paul, now 6 months old, gurgled through the whole ceremony, grabbing the judge's pen like he was ready to sign the papers himself. Afterward, we had cake in the courthouse courtyard under a maple tree just starting to bud. Sophia looked up at me with those serious gray eyes she got from her mother, eyes that had seen too much, and asked, "Grandma Eleanor, does this mean you're our mom now?" I knelt so we were eye to eye, feeling the spring sunshine on my back, the weight of 3 small hearts trusting me completely. "I'm anything you need me to be. Mom, grandma, safe place. Titles don't matter. You're mine and I'm yours. That's the part that counts." She nodded solemnly, then threw her arms around my neck so hard we almost toppled over. Liam joined a second later, wrapping around us both, and Paul squealed from his stroller like he understood perfectly. 2 years later, I'm 64, chasing a hyper 3-year-old boy through the sprinklers while his big sister practices cartwheels in the backyard, grass stains on her knees and laughter in her throat, and his big brother builds Lego spaceships that actually fly, mostly into the couch with dramatic sound effects. My house smells like crayons and coffee and the lavender sachets I still sew when I can't sleep, the same ones that hang above 3 beds now instead of 1. Some nights I sit on the porch, the same porch where 2 scared children once waited for someone to choose them, and I watch fireflies with 3 kids who call me mom now, because that's what feels right to them, their small voices rising and falling like music against the summer dark. I never planned this life. I thought my story was supposed to be quiet sunsets and maybe 1 miracle baby held in trembling arms. Instead, I got 3 miracles who saved me as much as I saved them, who taught me that love isn't measured in perfect plans, but in showing up day after day, even when your heart is racing and your hands are shaking and you're terrified you won't be enough. And if you're out there wondering whether it's too late to start over, whether love can still find you after loss, whether one no can change everything, look at us. We're proof. If this story touched something in you, drop your own experience in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to hear more about how broken things can become whole again, subscribe and stay with me. Because none of us are really alone. We just have to be brave enough to open the door when love shows up wearing someone else's face.